Year 9, welcome back to the series of videos. I'm sure you're very excited to learn about allegory today. So basically in this lesson we're going to learn about Stevenson's use of allegory in the text, and in particular about the novel as an allegory of original sin and degeneration. So let's get started with the definition. So, an allegory is a story, poem or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. So an allegory is also related to a metaphor in that a text's characters, settings or plot have another meaning beneath the surface. An allegory is often spiritual in nature, so that the concrete material parts of the text have more abstract meanings. So what I would like you to do as your first task is just write down what might we infer from these allegories. What could be the hidden meaning? So you might like to pause the video at this point just to write a few notes down, and then we can move on. So, perhaps the most famous literary allegory is John Burnand's The Pilgrim's Progress, which is a 17th century story about a journey on earth that is also about the soul's ascension to heaven. A more recent example is Arthur Miller's The Crucible, which on the surface is about the Salem witch trials, but is also an allegory for McCarthyism in the 20th century. So McCarthyism is a name given to the period of time in American history that saw US Senator Joseph McCarthy produce a series of investigations and hearings during the 1950s in an effort to expose supposed communist infiltration of various areas of the US government. So it was another way of showing how the US government was really corrupt back then. So The Crucible's actually been made into a drama production as well. Okay, let's move on then to Allegory of Original Sin. So Stevenson's text could be an allegory about original sin and the fall of man in biblical terms. Judeo-Christian myth begins in Genesis after God creates the universe and populates the earth with plants and animals. Adam and Eve are the first human inhabitants of earth contained within Eden, a place without sin. Satan invades this space, however, and tricks Eve into tasting from the tree of knowledge, which God has forbidden. Thus, Eve sins and God banishes Adam and Eve from Eden. For Christians especially, every human is born bearing Eve's original sin. Baptism purifies, but we are still sinful creatures who must seek forgiveness from God. So in Stevenson's text, Hyde could embody this original sin. Jekyll, a professional doctor from polite society, develops a serum that will transform him into another figure so that he can satisfy his carnal or sexual desires. But Hyde eventually takes over. Jekyll cannot control his evil double, and in the end, Hyde has fully taken over since Utterson discovers Hyde's dead body. Stevenson may be suggesting that we cannot give in to the sin that lies within each of us. Jekyll finds a way to let it out, but is ultimately consumed by it. Okay, I'll just give you some time to pause the video if you need to, just to make some notes on that, because this kind of information is very important for context and actually language analysis as well, if you're going to find an example of allegory in the text itself and then link it to this story of Genesis. Alright, so now let's move on to degeneration. So Charles Darwin's 1859 text on the origin of species caused a sensation for its theory of evolution by natural selection. His 1871 text, The Descent of Man, specifically theorised that man descended from primates. Some 19th century thinkers attempted to argue that man could also degenerate back into animals. For them, criminals, prostitutes, and mentally or physically disabled people were proof of this degeneration. So I actually got this image on the screen now from LinkedIn, and it kind of shows the evolution of man through a kind of business sense, a business lens. So we start with a genetic fit, strong culture and business strategy, ready for competition, understand and adapt with external factors, being able to innovate, being agile, adopting best practices and be ahead of the industry trends, having the skills to diversify and to try to be industry leaders through survival of the fittest. So this is all ingrained within us through our evolution. Okay, so let's now link that to the text. So Stevenson may have constructed the text as an allegory of this theory of degeneration. Hyde is very clearly a degenerate. Not only is he gruff and uncontrollably violent, but he is also slouched and smaller than Jekyll. So physically and mentally, he is a degenerate. So it's as if he's shrunk into a primate. Stevenson makes this clear by describing Hyde as ape-like. Okay, so for example, where my mouse is now, this is evolution. So this is Dr. Jekyll, for example. If someone degenerates, then we're going to go back like this. So can you see the difference? Okay, so Mr. Hyde is more like this guy, more slouched over, more violent. He's smaller than Jekyll. Okay, so that's why he's described as ape-like in chapter 4. Okay, so Jekyll's theorem demonstrates that there is a degenerate living within us. Civilized society has the potential to degenerate into violent barbarism. So that again links to Genesis and the whole story of giving into temptation, giving into sin. That lies within all of us. And it's whether we give into that sin or not, which is the difference. Brilliant. Okay. So let's move on to our apply section. So I've just given you a couple of tasks here. So I want you first to find 3 examples of allegories of your own. They don't have to be from the text. So you could just Google, for example, example of allegory, and then as soon as you've done that, I want you to explain to me why you think your examples are allegories. What makes them an allegory? After this, I'd like you to write a paragraph explaining these allegories, explaining the allegories already discussed in this lesson. So you could talk about the degenerate allegory, or you could talk about the Genesis allegory, and just remember that P structure. Okay? Fantastic. All right, so let's just do a quick review, a quick lesson summary. So an allegory is like a metaphor in that the elements of the text stand for something else. Remember that hidden meaning. Allegories tend to be spiritual in nature, meaning that concrete parts stands for more abstract ideas. And Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde could be an allegory for the fall of man, or it could be more topical, which means of the time, commenting on debates over evolution in the 19th century, linking to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. All right then, guys, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you get on with those tasks, those 3 tasks throughout this video. If you've got any questions on this, let me know, because this is a really interesting topic. Okay, thank you again. Over and out.